Why do you say that, Father? You aren't afraid, are you?
No, but I respect some of the superstitions of others. Often they are founded in fact.
Broadcasting live from our home in Venice, California. This is the Sixth Sense Society. I'm your host, Krista, here with our producer, Michael. And today we are excited to welcome back musician, composer, and all-around very talented man, Ray Davis. But we're going to be talking today about Freemasonry, not music, as we did before. So that might slip in, you never know. But before we get started, Michael has some announcements.
Hi, everybody. We hope you guys are hanging in there with all the quarantining going on and stay at home and keep a distance stuff, social distancing. Please take it seriously. So many people are going to be tragically affected by this, and we want you guys to be safe, so don't take any chances. All right, we got a couple great shows coming up still. We have Renee Starr coming up next week on witchcraft, and that's going to be really cool. She's a lot of fun. Looking ahead, we've got some great shows coming up next month. We have Zalima coming back to do a show on some prosperity stuff. We're hoping Krista's dad will be back on again. He's always fascinating. So lots of things in the works. You can get a lot of information on our website, sixthsensesociety.com, SIXTH, all spelled out. And while you're there, please buy us a coffee. We've now registered with Ko-Fi as creators, so it's a chance for you guys, if you enjoy the show, to support us a little bit. And for go to their website. You'll find a link on ours to our page there, and buy us a coffee. And the money we raise helps to cover our cost of producing the show, our hosting and our equipment, all that good stuff. So we really appreciate it. And thanks to all of you who subscribed. Our subscribers just keep growing in leaps and bounds, and we're super excited. And we're doing our best to try and bring you some great shows during the lockdown. As I was saying to our guests, there's a big difference between a studio apartment and a studio. So we're working from home, and it's a little challenging tech-wise, but we're making it work. And I'm excited for our guest today. He's a brother of mine at our lodge, Sunset Lodge, who's a big patron of our show. And Freemasonry is just a fascinating topic, and so I'm sure he's going to have lots to share with us. So I'm going to kick it back to Krista, and I'm sure I will have lots of questions. So take it away, Krista.
Thanks, Michael. I just wanted to add one thing about Renee Starr. I've known her for many, many years, and she is a very remarkable woman, and she is the author of this book, You Are Women, You Are Divine, and she really focuses on all different kinds of goddess and female archetypes. And she recently also started this very beautiful digital magazine, The Witch's Moon magazine. So I think we're going to have a wonderful show with her. So welcome, Ray.
Thank you, Krista. How are you?
Doing pretty good considering everything. We were talking about that earlier, but Michael and I are a little bit of a hermit anyway, so we're doing pretty good. And yourself?
Doing very well, thank you. Actually, Lori and I stay around the house a lot anyway, and so I'm not feeling too antsy, but I do miss crowds, I got to tell you.
Well, I think being a musician, you would.
Yeah. Just love the crowd, love having people around, that energy. But one thing I'm grateful for is the silence. The city is so quiet, and so I'm kind of enjoying that. But we're doing just fine. Thank you.
That is really true. I'd like to say that Venice is more quiet, but unfortunately we live near a liquor store, so it's still a little loud sometimes. Not as bad, but it's still a little bit crazy. So anyway, let's get going on the topic, Freemasonry. So I would like to know personally how you first became interested in Freemasonry.
My first thought about Freemasonry came through my mother. Years and years and years ago, I was probably about 10 or 11. And I don't remember how the conversation came up, but she happened to mention that her father, my grandfather, was a Mason. And being part of the specific Protestant Christian denomination that we were, she was leery of Masonry. And so I think she was saying it as a way to warn me more than anything else not to become involved. So just like, any imaginative kid, you warn me about something, it's going to pique my interest. So in the back of my mind, I always had this thing about Masonry, and I remember my mother saying that Masons have these ways of knowing each other and these secrets and that kind of thing. And I'm wondering, what are these secrets? What is it? I want to know about it. So that was the first thing.
So was your grandfather part of the Prince Hall lodges then?
Yes, he was part of Prince Hall Lodge because of his generation. A lot of things were kept back from, especially his generation. But yeah, he was a Prince Hall Mason. So I don't know much more about it though, because he left the planet before I had a chance to talk to him about it.
Okay. So then, what was your next step towards Masonry after that?
My next step was conversations with our past master, David Neal, who happens to play with me in our band. We played music together. I've known David for years and years and years and years, and I did not know that he was a Mason.
Really?
He happened to mention it. Yeah, he happened to mention it. And again, I don't remember the context. We talk about all kinds of stuff. And, again, the ears are perking up, and it's like, oh, really? David's a Mason? And by the time I'd had some familiarity with Masonic symbolism and some of the teachings through other spiritual studies of mine. I heard references to Masonry, and I was very interested to know more about the Masonic side of these studies. So, David mentioning it was interesting to me, but again, I didn't pursue it so much. When we talked a little bit later, and he said, hey, you should come by the lodge, because I think he had a feeling that I would enjoy the process, enjoy everything, and also be a benefit to the lodge if I chose to submit an application. So I came to the lodge about 3 years ago now, and instantly fell in love with the brothers. Fell in love with the place, loved it, loved everything. And it was not a question of, do I like it? Maybe. No question, just boom, right away from me.
So you seem to be very active there already, but before we get into that, what was your experience like that you can share with people, since I know you can't share everything with everyone who is not a Mason, about going through the process of becoming a Mason?
Well, the process, the ceremony.
Yes.
That was eye-opening. It's something that I could not have anticipated. It's something I can't, like you said, something obviously I can't share, but my experience was really an awakening. And a lot of things began to, in the interior, make sense. I'm a very esoteric person by nature. I take things in and I go within for verification. I consider all teachings as but invitations to go within and a bit of guidance. I really believe that, and my experience has shown me that teaching, whether it's through book, through mouth to ear, through conversation, through classes, they're really just pointers. And again, an invitation to have an internal experience. So it was really an inner eye-opening experience for me.
Michael, I think, has a comment question.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention that when it comes to the ritual, I mean, definitely there's some very specific things that we're not supposed to talk about, and being passingly familiar with Freemasonry on my own part. But I will say that there's an incredible difference between, I think, Freemasonry and a lot of the other organizations who are well-intended, the Elks and all these other fraternal organizations. And first of all, I just think we go back a lot further. I mean, we have documents from the 1400s, so we are the granddaddy of all of them, really, when it comes right down to it. And they're not exaggerating when they say it is the world's oldest fraternal organization. But I think that the ritual itself, you know, first of all, it's incredibly profound. And I found, especially the third degree, and there's just nothing quite like it. You know, there's an initiation aspect to it that creates almost an out-of-body experience where you get to really comprehend mortality and everything else. It's phenomenal. It's just an amazing ritual and experience. But, and I'm sure Ray will have comments, but I think also when you look at the ritual itself, I think many of the other fraternities, it's not really a hazing, but kind of. It's sort of a moral aspect to it. But I think the depth to the Masonic ritual, based on the Hermeticism, the Kabbalah, and I'm not sure how and where that became established in the ritual early on, but I think that there is an incredible esoteric depth to the Masonic ritual that I don't really think a lot of other organizations have at the same level, as far as I'm concerned. So I'd be curious to hear, I know Ray's very educated in some of the esoteric stuff, so I'd be curious to hear his thoughts on that.
I'm agreeing 100%. What I experienced, and I'm keying in my mind now on initiation itself, specific, that first bit of ritual, because it was so new to me. I was prepared. I was properly prepared. Yet, in a sense, I was not. It was everything was a complete surprise. The physical experience, but the language used in the ceremony, much of which I could not identify specifically, but it led me to an inner experience that tied everything together for me. My Kabbalistic studies in Hermeticism, work with tarot. The symbolism began to take form, so to speak, in the ceremony for me. I don't know if that does that make sense?
Totally. I wanted to add a little brief clarification for someone that might not know anything about Freemasonry. In order to join Masonry, you have to first be a member or initiated into the Blue Lodge. And I can say this, I know from, I don't know how I know, but I know to be initiated, there are 3 degrees that everyone goes through, with, I guess, each degree being something a little different, you know, for the person. So I do know that much. The one thing I wanted to add as a woman and a wife to Michael when he was going through the degrees, I did write them down. I had some unusual dreams. And I was a little surprised because, you know, why would I have them? But I think that when someone you're connected with very closely goes through any kind of spiritual thing, that in a lot of ways, they can take you through some of it too. At least that was my experience. I know one dream was very Masonic, and I think it was something to do with the Knights Templar. So
wow.
That's one of the reasons I thought, wow, there must be something going on good for Michael. And the other thing, my own observation was, obviously, I've never read about the degrees, and I just decided for my own reasons, in case I ever wanted to join Masonry as a woman, I wasn't going to read about them. And but I did notice when Michael came back, I could see he had been through something, you know, like an altered state, or just like someone coming back from a meditation retreat, or that there was something happening for him. So that you know, impressed upon me that they must be fairly legitimate rituals, is how I would have said it.
I would say they're most certainly legitimate. And I'm also finding in a sort of exoteric, in other words, outward point of view, that having gone through the degrees, having gone through the ritual, I can see reflections of elements of the ritual in a lot of things in outer life. When a president, for instance, takes the oath of office in public, I'm hearing echoes of ritual, and I have acquaintance with people who are in other mystery schools and have had other kinds of initiation rituals. There's a certain element that is in common with them. So my awareness, my consciousness has expanded just from being initiated, just from the first degree. And as Michael mentioned, the ideas, the principles, the teachings of Masonry as embodied in the ritual, it's rich. It really is quite rich. And having the opportunity now to look back and to continue to study, I see more and more and more and more because of a very specific and exact use of language. This is very important to me because to embody these ideas in language, it's easy to get slippery. It's easy to lose specific meaning if you're not choosing the words carefully, choosing the construction of sentences and paragraphs carefully, choosing the order, sequence of ideas, and the thoughts and meditation and tradition, tried and true tradition, so to speak, that I see evident in the ritual has a direct impact on the candidate's experience. I know that it did for me.
So do you know if the rituals are basically the same as when they began Masonry? Have they kept the wording the same? Has it been revised over time?
Well, my understanding is that a lot of ritual, like in all organizations, there has been some change, and there can be some differences, for instance, between what one might hear specifically in a lodge in London as opposed to a lodge in Los Angeles. Mm-hmm. But the ideas are the same. Michael, can you speak to that more specifically?
Yeah, I think that the ritual has evolved a little bit over the years for sure. But having said that, it really hasn't at the same time. I think a lot of the core teachings, the core structure, at one point there was 2 degrees rather than 3, but the degrees were just broken up differently. All the same things were there. So I think that the majority of the ritual we go through is not drastically dissimilar to what it was in the early 1700s when the Grand Lodge formed in 1726. So it's fascinating. And when you think about that lineage, that we belong to, in the sense that Washington took the same rituals and obligations we did and so forth, presidents and paupers and everybody in between. So, and I think that that's fascinating. And also, again, and unfortunately, that's where I think a lot of the conspiracy theory comes from too, in the sense that a lot of very influential people have belonged to Freemasonry over the years. And certainly historically, the idea of the Age of Enlightenment coming out of a lot of the Masonic lodges in Europe, because free thinkers were allowed to belong to Masonic lodges. They had a certain refuge there. So it really was a hotbed of heretical thought when it came to politics and society. So I think as a result, we've ended up with a lot of conspiracy theory that we're a counterculture that runs the world or something. And I always tell people that our lodge can barely organize a picnic, let alone run the world. So I don't know. It's a big task. So I don't think that any Masonic organization runs the world. But nonetheless, it is what it is. But it is a fascinating ritual. And I think also, just for the sake of how influential it's been, you look at, as I said, so many of the other organizations. In fact, Krista and I were talking about this, the Gerald Gardner, who created the Gardnerian witchcraft. If you look at a lot of their initiation rituals, were basically stolen from Freemasonry because he was a Freemason. So he took the structure of the Masonic ritual, he grafted onto it. He was a nudist, so some of the nudity and stuff, and he created his own thing. And then Mormonism, is based a lot on the Scottish Rite, the whole religion, because the 2 founders of Mormonism were Scottish Rite Freemasons. So they actually took the Masonic ritual and created the basis for Mormonism, which is why so many Mormons also become Masons, because they're completely familiar with all of the ritual work, since it's what they go through in the Mormon church. So it definitely has been a major influence, but I don't think that the ritual has changed much. And then one other quick comment before I go back to Ray is there is such an incredible esoteric aspect to the ritual. And Krista mentioned the 3 degrees. And essentially what they connect to is the concept of body, mind, and soul. So the first ritual basically focuses on the physical needs, the need to sustain your body and so forth, take care of your physical well-being. And there's a Buddhist saying that a man can't achieve enlightenment on an empty belly. So it's the idea of making sure that your physical needs are first taken care of. Once that's taken care of, the second initiation ritual focuses on the development of intellect. So it's really about developing the intellectual mind and so forth. And the third degree is the soul aspect, which again focuses on the afterlife and all of the very nebulous esoteric things that come with that part of it. But definitely, I don't think it's a coincidence that we have 3 degrees. I think it's very much a body, mind, and soul kind of a concept. So I'd be curious to hear Ray's thoughts on that.
Yeah, and actually, I think that is, again, related to the connection between Masonic teachings, Freemasonry teachings, and other esoteric traditions in the Western tradition. For instance, you look at the glyph of the Tree of Life, the Itachim used in Kabbalah. As we ascend from the material existence, it's exactly that order that you mentioned, Michael. Body, mind, intellect, and actually it also include emotion, the feeling aspect of things, and soul or spirit. And so it's an ascent up through those levels. In essence, those 3 degrees are happening in an evolutionary sense for the individual. And here's another thing that I really appreciate about Freemasonry, reflected in those 3 degrees. By attending to one's body, making sure that the physical vehicle is strong and able to sustain life, by attending to the intellect, and therefore, which informs emotion. Now I have a sense of mastery over things, these 2 degrees. I have a sense of mastery over things that befuddle vast numbers of people. You think about it, how many people in the world today are basically slaves to their illnesses, brought about by a misunderstanding of the body temple and what it needs and what is most important, as opposed to simply responding to ad messages about what you should eat and what you shouldn't drink. Not to say that anything is forbidden, but it's a matter of having a sense of a mastery over the physical vehicles. And how many people today are rocking back and forth because they hear a message here, they hear a message there, and they have no sense of self, able to discern what information is true and what is not true, what is helpful and what isn't helpful, what's important and what isn't important, and allowing their emotions to run amok. So to have a mastery over body and mind and emotions then really equips one to explore the higher realms in spiritually, to evolve, to unfold spiritually. So I appreciate that about Freemasonry, because it brings it down into concrete terms and concrete teachings that brothers can then take to become better men and to just be better, just better.
So a clarification for me, though, when you talk about mastery of the physical, that doesn't necessarily mean if I'm disabled when I'm born that I cannot master the physical. So you look at like Stephen Hawkins and what he did with his disease, that he was able to master his body in ways that many of us wouldn't have wanted to try even. So that,
absolutely,
so that people don't assume that means, oh, we're all going to be like perfectly healthy then.
No. We, as a matter of fact, no one is. And this is, again, something that comes through Masonry. There is no specific prohibition, in form. That which makes a Mason is not perfection or any aspiration towards perfection. So I love the example you used there, Krista. Stephen Hawking absolutely mastered the physical vehicle. Even though he was born with predilection to a particular condition. And all of us have all kinds of things. I mean, I came in African American, so there are certain kinds of conditions that tend to show up more with us.
Yes.
So, am I going to despair if a condition shows up that could be predicted by my lineage? No. Instead, I'm going to work with who I am now, what I am now, and make the best of what I have available. And not, again, the difference between mastery and not mastery is having the ability to choose consciously, and to say, this is my intention, this is who I am, what I'm about, and so therefore these are the practices, the things I'm going to do to sustain that. So that's really more of what I'm speaking to, as opposed to, physical perfection. We definitely don't want to go down that route. You haven't seen me naked.
One of the things that I think is fascinating about the fraternity as well, and coming back to the ritual again, is the emphasis on mortality. And the whole idea that someday we are all going to die. That's all there is to it. And the emphasis then being, what do you want to be remembered for? What do you intend to do in this lifetime? So it kind of creates that greater awareness. And I think it's fascinating in the sense that man is one of the few creatures that's able to comprehend his own mortality. And so I think by bringing that almost into a sharper focus through the degrees, it creates a change, hopefully, where a person will then realize, I don't really want to spend the rest of my life on petty things, on things that are superficial and unfulfilling. And it almost creates that greater sense of urgency to try and perhaps do something a little more profound, and at least hopefully anyway. And I suppose there's always the theory you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink. So no two people will probably experience the ritual the same. And then one other point real quick that I'd like to hear Ray talk about too, but the whole idea that in Masonry, I believe, is the idea that the teacher is irrelevant. And I always think that that's a fascinating part of the ritual as well, that people go through this experiential ritual, but nothing is really that explained to them in terms of what this really represents and what it's all about, other than perhaps on the very most superficial level. And I think that the intent was that, first of all, there's a certain benefit to having your own take on it. And so I think people are encouraged to have some originality in how they look at it, their own unique perception, their own unique experience being validated. And I think that when you start to say this is what this means, things become very dogmatic. And I think the whole idea of the Masonic ritual is not to sort of be as dogmatic, which I think is one of the great things about it. But also the idea that if a person is curious about, higher learning and higher things, they'll pursue that knowledge. We're just kind of giving them a little shot of gee, that was curious. I wonder what that means. And then they start to read and research and look into it. Whereas if a person isn't really inspired to want to learn, there's no point in us trying to pound the knowledge into them, because they're going to reject it. They're not going to really be open to it. So the idea that if a person is willing to learn, then we shouldn't have to teach them. And if they're not willing to learn, we can't teach them. So the teacher kind of becomes irrelevant, which I think is just an amazing part of the Masonic philosophy.
I like that particular perspective too, Michael, because as I said earlier, regardless of how teaching is received, I really believe that it's simply a pointer. Go this way, look at this. It's almost like a hint, a suggestion. And that has been my experience with all esoteric teachings that I've come across anyway. It's really just a suggestion. And then if you are really interested, you pursue. And just in conversations with different brothers, you can hear levels of engagement, so to speak. And there's no judgment also about where a particular brother lies, whether they want to become a Masonic scholar or just, stay with where they are, once they've become a Master Mason. So I really appreciate that as well.
One of the things that strikes me about Masonry that I like is that it has different levels that are all legitimate. Like they do a lot of charity work. They're really big on education. They've influenced countries, and then they have this esoteric side. So what it appears to be, in my mind, watching is like as if they're really trying to integrate the different worlds, Masonically speaking, the ones that take Masonry seriously, that want to really go out there and do something with their teaching. So that's what strikes me just looking at it as an outsider.
I agree with that, and it's I've described it as an esotericism. In other words, there's a very strong outward expression, And I would say that if anyone is interested in at this point, men and women there are lodges available for women, but of course I'm speaking principally to male. A man who's finds themselves interested in esoteric studies but not knowing where to start, I would say the Masonry is an excellent place to start because it encourages and demonstrates an external expression of these teachings. So I don't become a better man just to be better in my house. It's how I am now appearing and expressing in the world individually. But then, of course, lodges do things together. And the Grand Lodge of California, there are constant messages about things that we can do in communities. So that is a major focus of Freemasonry.
Well, going back to what you said earlier today about your mother sort of being nervous about Masonry, now that you're in Masonry, why do you think that there are not only people that are afraid of Masonry or nervous, but they really speak out against it as very evil, and you'll find all kinds of websites about it? And what do you think that's about from your point of view?
From my point of view, it has a lot to do with something Michael just said. One of the reasons that in Masonry we're not necessarily going to spell out, this means this means that, is that it's easy then to fall into orthodoxy. And when groups of people are bound by an orthodox point of view, and this is not to cast aspersions on any religious or organization that has that as part of the name. It's not that it's the idea of orthodoxy. In other words, a very concrete and specific definition of things. God is this and not that. Right is this and not that. Bad is this. Is that it can become a means of suppressing free thought. So my mother, who is a devout Christian, and I wouldn't take a thing from her because it's such a blessing for her life and for the people that she's around. It's a wonderful, wonderful thing for her. The reason for the fear is because many people have been told that anything outside of the specific interpretation of religious ideas or religious thought is to be feared. If it's not what we have told you about, it's of the devil. Mm-hmm. And, beliefs about the devil being almost a co-equal power opposite that of God. And there's eternal back and forth and back and forth. The orthodoxy around those kinds of ideas makes it easy for people to be fearful of anything that seems to be different. Even to this day, when I talk to my mother every once in a while and say, "Oh yeah, I was at the lodge last night," or "I'm going to the lodge," and she's so sweet. She gets a little quiet. She doesn't want to impose, but I know she just wants to tell me, "Get out of there."
Aww.
A couple of things too, touching on this. There's that why do they hate us kind of thing that I'm always curious about, and why wouldn't you want to know that? So did a little bit of research, and of course, Catholics really don't have a close relationship with Masons. We've got no problem with Catholics, but they don't like us. Well, it turns out that, not surprisingly, was all political. And it happened mostly during the Jacobite uprising. And until then, actually, Freemasonry, the Catholics were quite cool with it, the popes. Mm-hmm. But what happened was there was this guy in Italy who, and of course, Prince Charlie was a Catholic. So after the failed uprising of the Jacobites, he fled to France, which was a predominantly Catholic country. And the Pope at the time thought there was this Freemason in Italy who was trying to use his Masonic connections to spy on the designs of the church when it came to the Jacobites. Right. So he passed a papal bull forbidding Catholics from being Masons because he didn't want anybody talking to this guy about what the church was up to when it came to the Jacobite uprising. And at the time, his brother, who was a cardinal, actually was a Freemason. That's how close the relationship was between the two. So completely political. It had nothing to do with theology or anything else. Completely just a political move on the part of the church. But the one that is is sort of a little bit theological in a sense is the Southern Baptist, and they're not big fans of us either. And some of the evangelical Christian movements are not very big fans. They think we're satanic, just like they think Buddhists and everybody else are satanic. And so I researched this a little bit to figure out where that comes from. And what it all boils down to, once you get to the very bottom of it, is that the opening and closing of Lodge, we have a short non-denominational prayer. Masonry is not allowed to endorse one particular religion over another, as Ray pointed out. And so in their particular worldview, you can pray for a non-Christian, but you can't pray with a non-Christian. You can pray for their redemption, you can pray for their conversion, but you can't pray with them until they convert. You can only pray for them. So if we would get rid of the prayers, in theory, we'd be fine. It's just the fact, because when we pray with non-Christians, we're basically validating their faith, and that's why that's a problem for them. So, and I'm thinking, what can you do with that, right? It's just not, my brain just doesn't work that way.
Yeah, and now I love that you brought up the political aspect of it, because those who have influence over the millions and millions of devout evangelical Christians living good lives, good people, those who have influence over their thought, they're the ones to be held to account, because they know the difference. They know the difference between that which is influenced by a theological dispute and that which really is a political dispute. And so what often happens I could get in trouble with this, but what often happens from my observation is that a lot of church leaders, and it's not just Christian, throughout the world you can see this also being true for Muslim and Hindu and definitely Judaism, is they will they'll mask political imperatives in religious language. Because if you can describe something to those who are already part of the body of your religious organization in moral terms, and especially in life-death terms, you're either saved or you're damned, kind of thing, if you believe this or don't believe that, then you really have a lot of leverage. You don't have to disclose the political part of it, but once you brought it into theological or spiritual terms, then it is a lot easier to get the populace to move the way you want them to move. So I agree with you 100% there, Michael. The thing about praying with, there are certain denominations, Christian denominations here in the United States, that will participate in ecumenical, or they'll stand beside Buddhists, they'll stand beside Jews, they'll stand beside Muslims and pray together. You'll see that, but not every denomination is open to that. And those that tend to be more fundamentalist will tend to be a bit more, very specific again with, this is what God is, this is what God is not, and so on.
I would like to get back a little to your personal journey right now with Masonry. I know that you're part of the Sunset Masonic Lodge and that you're currently the junior warden there. How do you feel about your approach to being a Master Mason? I'm not a Master Mason, but Master of your Lodge. You are a Master. You're already a Mason, but Master of your Lodge.
Sometimes I think, I hope these guys know what they're doing.
Well, that's honest.
No. The truth of it is, I'm taking this experience with ears wide open, eyes and ears wide open. I believe one of my chief responsibilities is to learn. So I'm sticking my neck into all kinds of things regarding the lodge. I want to know how things operate. I want to know how, what the responsibilities are, what's important for a lodge, for the upkeep of the lodge, what is best for all of the brothers involved, as opposed to, my own specific self-interest. But at the same time, also, I know that a vision of leadership will emerge from this. But right now, I'm interested in being more sponge.
Michael, you have a question or comment?
Yeah, a comment. Of course, I have a little experience at Master of the Lodge from back in the day.
Yeah.
And one of the great things about Freemasonry in that sense is that it does give you that chance to lead a body. and have real power, real leadership over it. So you're learning those skills in a very safe environment, which hopefully then you can take out into the world and apply to other things as well. So I think that that's one of the really great benefits of being a master. But just for the benefit of those who are listening, and it varies from place to place. There's no pope. There's no central figure in Freemasonry. Every state, every country has its own Grand Lodge, and everyone is autonomous. So that it does vary a little from place to place. But here in California, there are 3 degrees. They're more or less like plays. And we require that they all be committed to memory. So Ray is learning that he has to memorize a lot of words. And if you were to recite all 3 degrees from beginning to end, it would take probably a couple of hours. It's a tremendous amount of memorization that you have to do. And so to become a master of the lodge, as Ray is going to be in 2 years' time, first of all, we have to believe enough in your maturity and your ability to govern the lodge that the lodge will elect you to become the master and to lead the lodge for a year. But having said that, you also have to qualify, which means you have to actually learn and memorize all of the ritual work. As a result, the statistics are that about 20% of the people that join the fraternity will end up becoming master of a lodge. So Ray will become part of a very small group in Freemasonry of what's called past masters once they're finished their year. And it literally is 1 in 5. So if we bring 5 new people into the lodge this year, one of them may have what it takes in terms of the ability and so forth to lead and govern the lodge as masters. So it is quite an honor. And I really think that of all the things I've done in life, it is one of the things, having been master of Sunset Lodge here in Santa Monica, that I'm actually still the most proud of.
How many positions do you go through before you become the master of the lodge? How many officers?
Well, I believe it's going to depend from brother to brother. There's something we have the opportunity to do called joining the line. So there are a number of positions and stations within the lodge that one can participate in, many of which do not necessarily require that you move towards becoming master of the lodge. But once you are elected as, first, my position is junior warden, that is a track towards being master. So it can vary from brother to brother, depending on their interest in participating. One of the things I wanted to say also is I have to answer a little bit more your question, Christian, about my approach. My approach is also one of recognizing that the challenges and opportunities, the challenges that I face in performing my duties as junior warden, the profound challenge of the enormous amount of memorization. And it's not just words, it's actions. It's a spirit of the ritual that has to be caught in consciousness. These are opportunities to grow in ways that I could not otherwise. So I anticipate, like Michael, being able to look back after my year of being master and saying, this is one of the best things, the most important things I've ever done in my life. Immersing myself in the ritual to memorize, there's so much that comes through that I could not have connected to simply by being a participant in the ritual.
Yeah, memorization is really interesting too, because I did it in not to the degree that Masons do, but Eastern Star, at least the one I belonged to, the chapter, we had to memorize our parts, and it just starts working unconsciously. In fact, sometimes I had to kind of try to turn it off, like, can I stop thinking about this now? And as I was right before, I was going to do my degree or whatever, and it's in your subconscious mind. I think it's clever if you can memorize, because it goes into your being much more deeper then.
I'll give you an example. You said you suspected music might show up here. It's going to show up right here. For years and years and years, since I was a child, I've participated in choirs. Lots and lots of choirs, either as a singer or as a director. Lots of choirs, lots of choir work. The spiritual center I attend more often than not is the Agape International Spiritual Center here in Los Angeles. And I sang with the choir there for a number of years. My wife and I both did. The method of learning music in that choir was by rote. Music was not so much written out. I was trained to read. I could read any music folio for choir. Easy for me. But the parts were by rote. And I really talked to the director and a number of people. I was part of a committee trying to put all of the music down into, note form so they could actually be taught to other choirs, et cetera. We did some of that. but continued to teach the songs by rote. In other words, the director would say, okay, altos, in this little section, you sing it da, 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 and then they repeat it, and you do it over and over and over again until it's memorized. Now, it's actually, in one sense, it's an inefficient way to teach a song. If, on the other hand, you have a choir full of people who read music, and you simply have the music there in front of them, they can sing the parts more easily, and then you work on interpretation. But the genius of the method of rote learning is that you're not simply learning the notes, but you are learning the performance along with it.
Mm-hmm.
And it sticks. It just sticks when it's memorized. Because the objective for any choir anyway is preferably you want to be performing off book like actors do. You're
Right.
not reading your script and it's memorized. So the sooner you get it in there, the more it sticks and has an effect on you. And any person who has ever been part of that choir at Agape can tell you their experience in singing those songs is so deep and so rich. And I'm absolutely certain it's in part because of the way the songs were taught in the beginning. Of course, the quality of the songs and the beauty of them, all of that. But that method of teaching, so memorization, right from the beginning, it places it in the heart, so to speak. And just like you said, Chris, it's like you can't even shut it off. You find yourself thinking and looking at things that way, and I can't tell you how often the word relief comes to my mind. When I'm out and about. I'm thinking, is there somebody needs help? I see somebody pulled over to the side. Lori will tell you, let me I'm going around the block. I'm always checking to see if somebody needs some help with something like that. Going to the grocery store. I remember coming out of the grocery store, there was an elderly woman who was working with a bag. I'm not going to let her walk with a bag. I had to grab the bag and help her out, get into the car. I don't care whether that's just a way of being now. It's a way of thinking and seeing. So, memorize right to the heart right away.
Well, and also your example is really, again, illustrating that becoming a Mason isn't all esoteric. It's about practically using the teachings in the everyday world, which seems to some people, I think, I have met people in the esoteric world since I'm a tarot card reader that are a little too lofty to me, that, sometimes, you just need to scrub the floor and that's really Zen, and it's there's sometimes people use the esoteric to escape from that first degree you talked about, the physical body and taking care of it, and also just dealing with your day-to-day world, which can have a lot of ordinary but helpful times in which you can actually do something to help someone. That I think is really important.
Well, look at one of the tools we use in esotericism, tarot. Tarot, you can spend all your time working with the esoteric ideas, especially the major arcana, but there's a whole body of study and work for the day-to-day stuff. I mean, it really can have an impact on your day-to-day. When it's time to scrub the floor, when it's time to do the dishes, when it's time to take out the trash, how are you being when you're walking around in the world? Same is absolutely true in Masonry. These ideas aren't for the purpose of just contemplation. Really, our nation was built by gentlemen who were what's the word I'm looking for? Swallowed, covered, died in Masonry, in Masonic teaching. So the principle had a major impact on the founding of our nation.
It's true, and
became real.
And the times we're in right now with the pandemic is a very good time in which I know lodges and brothers will stand up to help practically each other, which is part of being a Mason. And even as a wife to a Mason, I have received benefits. That's another thing I like about Masonry, is that practical application to all of the people connected to the lodges.
Yes. taking care of the families, taking care of the day-to-day, needs, whatever it is. The communication between our brothers in our lodge is so full of all kinds of things. We let it all hang out, so to speak, and I really appreciate that. By the way, that's another thing I appreciate about Freemasonry is the brotherly aspect of it, the brotherly love. I've got 3 brothers I grew up with, and as much as we love each other, man, we used to fight. There would be times my little brother would get on my nerves, and I get on his nerves, getting that again. But 2 minutes later, we're making up just by going to play another game, and we are brothers in the truest sense. And the underlying and overriding concept is love and relief and truth. We are here for each other. We are here to support each other. And it's beautiful to see that there are, in our communications with each other, words of support, words of encouragement.
Michael, you have a comment?
Yeah, a couple of things. First of all, I just wanted to apologize to Ray earlier because we do have, as people know, a pet crow that we rescued who probably saw a cat out the window. So if you heard a crow cawing very loudly, you'll know that was Lily. So we do apologize for that. As I said, doing the show in our apartment is a little less than ideal. We'll be looking forward to getting back to our studio space where it's nice and quiet. But one of the things that people often ask is, what is Freemasonry? And I like to boil things down to the simplest possible concept I can grasp in listening to the conversation. What I always tell them is that it is applied spirituality in my mind. It's just taking these spiritual concepts that we develop, but it's also about putting those things then into practice, living that spiritual life, the willingness to go that extra mile to help someone in need and so forth. And I really think that is the best, most simplest term when somebody says, what is Freemasonry? To me, I always say it's applied spirituality.
I'm going to steal that. I like that. That is exactly what I meant in talking about the exoteric side of it. Yeah, applied spirituality. That's very good. Yeah.
So
that's perfect. That's a perfect description.
Going back again to your own personal kind of connection, do you plan to or already belong to any of the concordant bodies in Masonry? I'm not sure how it works if you can join which one when, like the Scottish Rite and the Royal Arch, but do you have any plans to be part of the other bodies?
I do not have plans, but I am open. Because for me, Blue Lodge is all that I need.
Well, Michael agrees with that.
Yeah, that's all. I do not have plans. But again, I'm open. If there is some inner prompting to explore further, I will definitely look at it. But I most certainly have enough on my plate right now.
Oh, yeah.
Sunset Lodge. But I appreciate the brothers who have gone further with that. And, yay, I'm good with Blue right now.
So from I know you haven't been involved literally in Masonry for very long, but from your observation as to where Masonry stands in sort of the popular culture, do you see more interest now, younger people joining? Do you feel it's being revived and there's maybe some innovation going on with Masonry?
I do see a lot more interest from younger men. We've had some very motivated young men joining, visiting our lodge recently. One in particular is becoming a personal friend of mine, a musician who I met through another musician friend. The other musician friend also happens to be a Mason. His lodge is out in the West Valley. And so it was too far for the young man he was talking to, so he referred him to me. And in talking to him, I can tell you, this kid is hungry. He is really motivated, really interested. And he's a beautiful soul, beautiful cat, And I'm seeing that, with younger guys that are showing up at our lodge to visit. So I think there is, I don't know if it's being spurred by anything other than the times in which we're living. There is a general kind of awakening, I think, to expanded ideas of spirituality. And the lens I tend to look through is one of my own background as a Protestant Christian. And, whereas the messages coming from churches was very standard, there are more churches that are opening to what would have been considered alternate 30, 40 years ago. Listen to Joel Osteen, for instance, and you're going to hear some ideas that Christians would not have expressed openly, number of years ago, or at least, certain Protestants. So I think there's a general opening of spiritual ideas, or opening to spiritual ideas. And so that would consequently show up in younger generations. And so, yeah, I think there is a greater awakening or interest in Masonry.
One of the misunderstandings of the public towards lodges is that you can't ever go into the lodges, but your Sunset Masonic Lodge specifically has programs that invite not only family members, but anyone, such as the jam session that you lead, which we're all looking forward to.
Yeah!
That's going to be off the charts, I think.
Woo, baby!
There have been different programs that allow people, the Model Railroad Show, and Michael was there, that really, I noticed the public were really so excited and have always been excited to come and look at the lodges. So I think there's some people think you can't ever go in a lodge. It's all so secret. And that's definitely something that just isn't true. Most lodges have some public events that I know of.
Yes, and as a matter of fact, I love the way the Grand Lodge of California states it. We are not a secret organization. We're an organization with secrets. Yes, but the lodge, the building, there are all kinds of things going on. If the gentleman's interested, you can come on by and we'll take you on a tour. Once everything is opened up again.
Yeah, of course, yes.
But like you mentioned, we do have programs that are open to the public, and once things are open up again, we've had it scheduled so that the final, in our particular lodge, Sunset Lodge in Santa Monica, the final Sunday of every month, there's something going on. Scheduled to go on at Sunset Lodge that's open. And so people are welcome to come, take a look at things, and I know people sort of find the furnishings and the symbolism to be interesting and catches their eye.
Yeah.
So there's a lot to enjoy there. And of course, the brothers are just welcoming people. We just, we like having folks around. It's a good thing.
Yes.
And being of service to the community.
There are really, I always tell people, two great secrets in Freemasonry. One of them is confidentiality that you have with a brother. So if you share a family problem or a business problem, that you have that expectation that will remain in confidence as you would with your minister, your accountant, your lawyer, your doctor, and so forth. So that's one of the great secrets in the sense that we don't share each other's personal business, and that gives us a safe venue to be able to counsel one another and so forth. And the other great secret in Freemasonry is the relationship you have with the divine. And it sort of comes back again to the Judaic idea that you can't even pronounce the name of God, and that this is an experiential thing, that it's a secret you'll carry within your heart because it's your own unique relationship with the divine, and it's not something you share with anyone else. It's just something that you have within you. And I really do think that, honestly, those are the two great secrets in Freemasonry as a whole. In Sunset, we probably have a third secret, which is where the light switch is for the lodge room, which everyone spends a lot of time looking for when they first join. And that's maybe our only other secret. But I think that those are honestly the two great secrets in Freemasonry.
It's funny, that last one is true.
It is so true. But I am looking forward. I just want to put a plug in for our jam sessions. I am so looking forward to those starting up again because, man, we're having a great time. And,
so is it on the website then that people can find out about the programs? Do you guys put on Sunset Masonic Lodge's website, or how can they find out?
That would be an excellent place to go when we have the different programs. They are on the website. Yeah. And
Michael, do you have that address?
We also
Michael?
have a Facebook page too.
Okay, so it's on
the website, it's very simply sunsetmasoniclodge.org. And so, absolutely, you can find all the information there, or just search us, on Google. And nowadays, we're pretty easy to track down.
And you're located on Ocean Park in Santa Monica.
Correct.
1720.
1720, yes. So is there any last thought or experience you'd like to share with us about Masonry?
I'm reflecting now on something that happened recently. One of our brothers had a real serious health scare. And I'm just reflecting again on how all the brothers in the lodge came together in love and support for this brother. And just appreciation, because he was one of the first people who impressed my wife with his love and openness and care towards everyone he talks to, because she witnessed it when she visited with me early in the lodge. And I think it really just comes down to that.
That's beautiful.
The spirit
I
of
love
Freemasonry is alive in that experience.
Well, thank you so much for coming on again and talking about Freemasonry. If you want to follow Ray, you can find him on Instagram at official Ray Davis Music. I think, is that one of the best places to find you?
That's a good one. And also on Facebook, look for Ray Davis Music, High Vibe Records. High Vibe Records.
Great. Well, thank you again. We really love talking to you.
Oh, it's great to be here, Krista. Thank you, Michael.
And thank you all for listening today. We hope you guys survive all this well as you can, and we look forward to talking to you next week as we continue to explore the esoteric and the obscure. Have a great week.